So welcome back, students. In this section we will be talking about various do's and don'ts. How should you prepare to appear for the interview? What should be your role as an interviewee? And also what should the interviewer look out for? How should the interviewer make himself ready before conducting the interview? And what should be your etiquette during the interview? And I'll also be giving certain examples of successful and unsuccessful interviews. So as an interviewee, what are the things that you should keep in mind? So there are various things that you should have awareness about before you appear for the interview. Number one, you should know the organization and nature of your job. What is it that you're going to do there? What is the company about? Those are the things that you should do a little bit of research about before you enter for a job interview. So it's always advisable to not randomly appear for an interview without doing any kind of research on your own. You should also know what are your habits, hobbies, what are your special skills. You should think them over in your mind. So never go with the assumption that you'll sit in that interview chair and all the answers will naturally pop up in your head. That's never going to happen. You have to mentally prepare yourself. Think that if suppose this question is going to come, this is how I'm going to respond. Okay, so that's how you prepare. You can also conduct mock interviews, ask your friends, ask your colleagues, whoever it is, to give you a mock test. The third thing is, you have to, what I have already mentioned before, anticipate the possible questions. This is the work, so these are the kind of questions that they are going to ask me. Suppose I'm going to, for an interview, to become an English teacher, then these are the questions. What subjects would you like to teach? Why is it that you would prefer certain subjects certain papers as opposed to others? So you have to you have to be in that interviewer's position. Think of the possible questions and prepare answers in your head roughly. It's not about mugging up those answers, because mugging up is never going to help you. In case you forget one line, one sentence, then your whole answer is ruined. So just thinking through, okay, so roughly these are the things I'm going to mention in my answers. You prepare a file, keep all your documents intact, be it in original and also in duplicate copies. You have to also bring out your interview letters and so on. Dress suitably for the interview. Arrive before time. So those are just some of the very basic etiquettes you have to keep in mind for going for any interview, be it a PhD interview or any kind of job interview. And lastly, maintain your composure. So if you're very nervous before the interview, then you have to, mentally pump yourself up that, you are going to, this is how you're going to present yourself as somebody who's very confident. What should be your conduct during the interview? You greet the entire board politely. That's the first step. You sit only when asked to take a seat. You pay attention to the questions asked by the interviewer. So you have to be very alert and you respond to them naturally. If you be honest, if you don't know any answer, then you have to admit it politely. You answer in brief and to the point. You have to express enthusiasm for the organization, for the job, and demonstrate that you are interested to serve, you are interested to work there. So you cannot, it should show in your body language. So you cannot sit relaxed in the chair, with your feet, with your legs crossed, and drinking tea. That's not the kind of body language that you should present yourself in. Avoid shifting of seats, because if you're constantly shaking in your seat, if you're biting your nail, if you're playing with the paperweight hanging in the table, if you're adjusting your tie. So those are all kinds of things that show anxiety and nervousness. Okay, so try not to annoy or offend the interviewer by making rude comments or overtly sensitive political comments and so on. When you talk about your previous job, you shouldn't have, an overtly bitchy kind of an attitude. That's never going to help you. It just shows your character. So you should talk about your job without overtly criticizing your employer or your colleagues or the work environment. Of course, constructive criticism is allowed, but you should not cross that line towards being overtly critical. And lastly, you need to thank the interviewer. So you begin with a polite greeting, you end the interview on a polite note. So this is your how you you behave during an interview as an interviewee. Now, interviewer also has to make their own preparation. As someone sitting out there to conduct an interview, what are the various things that you should keep in mind? Firstly, you should screen the application form. Among thousands of applicants, you have to select the suitable ones, see if they meet all the criteria. You have to call the candidates through letters. We talked about drafting the letters earlier. You have to make proper arrangement in the sitting room, in the waiting room. You have to keep the interview room, which has to be completely separate from from the hustle and bustle of the organization. So no sound should infiltrate. You have to decide the questions to be asked by various specialists. And you have to prepare the list of candidates in a proper sequence. And during conducting of the interview, the interviewer also has certain roles. Now, these are his roles. He is to welcome the candidate with and respond to their greeting. The interviewer has to initiate the dialogue between himself and the interviewee. He has to make the candidate feel at ease, generally by asking common questions about their name, where they studied, why did they choose this specific organization, and so on. He has to also encourage the candidate through non-verbal cues. So if you're looking down, if you're showing disinterest, then that's going to demotivate the candidate to respond to you. So you have to be, with your facial expressions, nods of the head. So non-verbal cues are always something, full of meaning when you're sitting for an interview. Be a good listener. Respect the sentiments of the other person. Avoid deconstructive criticism. So never be too harsh in your comments and critique. And you have to make full inquiry of the interviewee's knowledge and experience. Give attention to verbal as well as non-verbal expression and use simple language. So nothing jargon-laden. And you thank the interviewee and wish them the best at the end of the interview. Now, here are some examples of successful and unsuccessful interviewee. Okay, so how can you be a successful interviewee versus what are the do's and don'ts? What are the things that you should avoid? So, if there is a question about the position, about your job goals for an unsuccessful interviewee. Unsuccessful interviewee is defined as someone who keeps changing their job 5 or 6 times during an interview. So if 5 or 6 times, if at one point you say your goal is to become an English teacher, next time you say your goal is ultimate dream is to become a contractor, so that's not going to work. A successful interviewee is someone who is specific and consistent and is able to explain why they want that specific position, does not change their goals. Knowledge about company and position. Now, how will an unsuccessful interviewee behave? Now, unsuccessful interviewee will show lack of knowledge. They will show that they are here in the interview and it is only here that they are learning about the company. But a successful interviewee is someone who has learned about the organization beforehand through journals, through online websites and so on. They are someone who've done their homework as far as the company and the nature of the job is concerned. Now, level of interest and enthusiasm about the job. The unsuccessful interviewee will, it will show in your body language. So they will respond with, neutral phrases like, okay, I see, very dull expressions. But a successful interviewee is someone who will, in his verbal as well as non-verbal communication, they will express enthusiasm. So they will use words like, that's great. Okay, so they will explicitly state their desire for working for this particular company. So when it comes to non-verbal behavior, unsuccessful interviewee is someone who will not make eye contact, smile infrequently, keep shifting in their seat, be very fidgety, show a lot of nervousness and anxiety. And a successful interviewee is someone who will make eye contact, who will have a positive body language, who will not display nervousness and anxiety. Now, the other point is, how good are you at picking up the interviewer's cues? So the unsuccessful person will give very vague or negative answers, even when a positive answer is desired. Now, what does that mean? Suppose the interviewer asks you something like, how open are you? Because this company is, you have to travel. This job requires certain amounts of travel, or you might have to work overtime. So would you be willing to do that? Now, obviously, this requires a positive answer, but you hesitate and you say, no, I have to be back home every day at 4 o'clock. So that's not going to work in your favor. Okay, so a successful interviewee is someone who will answer positively, who will show this problem solving attitude, this positive attitude that they are willing to do any kind of work that is required of them. Now, suppose there is a topic shift by the interviewer during the interview. So you're talking about the subjects that you studied, and suddenly they ask you something like, you've only studied in your entire school life or your college life, you've not done any extracurriculars. Okay, then how would you respond to that? An unsuccessful interviewee will resist that topic shift. They will not go along with the flow, along with the nature of the question being asked. But a successful interviewee is someone who will accept that, who will listen attentively, and who has that presence of mind to shift according to the shifting questions of the interviewer. Now, use of certain industry terms and technical jargon. So every field has a set of terms which we called technical jargon that is specific to that field. Right? So unsuccessful interviewee will not have any idea about those terms, whereas a successful interviewee knows how to use the jargons at the appropriate time. Okay, so it's not about randomly using jargons to display your knowledge, but you do have to use jargons, your specific academic jargons, like for commerce and economic students, point of purchase display. And that's a jargon. For us, for laymen, it really doesn't make any sense. But if you are seeking that job in that particular environment, you should be familiar with certain jargons. Use of specifics in answers. Okay, so that's how the successful interviewee will respond. Now, the other topic is how do you answer? The unsuccessful one will give short answers, one-word answers, sometimes less than 10 words, and will not elaborate with examples, with evidence. But a successful successful interviewee is someone who will answer appropriately, not short, not monosyllabic, with personal experiences. He will support it. He will give comparisons, statistics, statements of teachers and employees. So he will have the complete evidence and data to back up his claims. So it will not be about one-word answers, because nobody likes to hear monosyllabic answers. So you always have to talk more than the interviewer. Now, questions asked by interviewee. Now, this is the last stage. The interviewee is also required to ask some questions. As a candidate, as a prospective applicant, even you have a certain role in the interview apart from simply answering questions. Now, the unsuccessful interviewee will ask a very small number of questions, very general questions, but the successful candidate will ask specific questions related to that particular industry. Okay, so like, what would my duties be in this organization? Okay, so they should have the confidence to ask questions to the interviewer as well. Now, time, what is the amount of time you should take up? For the unsuccessful candidate, the interviewee talks only 37% of the time and initiates roughly, you can say, 36% of the comments. But the successful candidate will talk the majority of the time, that is 55%, and he or she will initiate the subjects 56% of the time. So these are the certain do's and don'ts that you should bear in mind. So I've talked about the different types of interviews, the first stage, which is drafting of the letter. As a candidate, what is it that you should look for in the letter? So if you receive a letter without those details, then you have to figure out those details. And I've also talked about what are, the things to be kept in mind, the warm-up stage as it is called, right from verbal to non-verbal to how you should dress, everything matters, along with, given you certain examples of how to respond when there are things like change in topic, or whether, you should ask questions to the interviewer or not. So those are just some of the, general things to bear in mind. That's all, and all the best for your exams.